Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 42 of Days Gone By, the review series for the classic and vintage cars of Gran Turismo, and this particular vehicle is technically a classic. In a very loose sense, it's from 1971, and this is, as I've mentioned on the channel before, the most expensive car ever built. It's the NASA spec Lunar Rover, the LRV-001. 3 of these were built, all 3 are still up there on the moon, and they are the most expensive cars ever built, as I said. They had an initial budget of $19 million to make, but they went way over budget. NASA had already predicted that. They actually ended up costing $38 million, not to buy, but to build, which is actually much more of a steep number when you consider that that is to make the car, not what NASA paid to buy the car. Now, buying a car for $38 million doesn't sound like a big deal. Building it for $38 million, that is another thing entirely, because $38 million isn't that much more than you'd pay for like a classic Ferrari these days. But that classic Ferrari didn't cost $30 million to build. It cost that because of its historical value. It would have actually cost far less than that to originally make. In fact, back then it would have been a few hundred or $1,000, or the equivalent to that, to build that car. So to cost this much to make a vehicle really is a testament to the kind of development that's gone into it. Now, for that kind of cash, what do you actually get? Because obviously what the car is required to do is totally different to literally any other car ever made. Well, the LRV-001 has 4 independent motors to power its drive. It's an all-wheel drive vehicle. It has a direct drive transmission, and it's essentially an electric car with all-wheel steering. You've got 1 horsepower in total to drive the wheels. I believe, if I remember correctly, you've also got another equivalent to 1 horsepower to power the steering itself. And you've got roughly a foot-pound of torque. Now, the car only weighs 210 kilos, which is remarkably low. That's a similar kind of weight to something like a buggy, a heavy buggy, that is, or a quad bike, if you get a big, heavy model. So that's not too bad, given the size of the vehicle. On the moon, though, due to the difference in gravity, it only weighs the equivalent of 35 kilos, which is not very much. Now, on Gran Turismo, this is the least powerful car in the game. It's also the slowest car in the game, with a top speed of roughly 15 or 16 miles per hour. Now, interestingly enough, and not surprisingly for Gran Turismo, that is quicker than it can actually go in real life. In real life, the moon speed record, and yes, there actually is one, is just over 11 miles per hour. So this is quicker on the game than it is in the real world, or on the real moon. Now, as far as handling, well, you can't really judge this car to the same parameters as any other car in the game. It's so different to everything else on the game. Even the Vision GT cars don't come close to how unique this vehicle is. The handling, of course, is relatively good, considering how little gravity it's got stabilising it. But of course, if you go over a jump on the moon, there's a pretty decent chance that if you're going at top speed, you'll end up upside down. So it's kind of hard to compare the handling on this car to a road vehicle, because it's just not the same at all. Now, as far as owning the car, driving the car, having the opportunity to enjoy using this vehicle, well, unfortunately you can't own it on GT6. It's a shame, I think, when games do that. There are certain racing games in particular which have vehicles that you can look at or interact with but not actually own. This, along with the 8-litre vintage Bentley from Forza 4 in the Auto Vista section, are 2 of the prime examples of that. Vehicles which are on the game, but you're not allowed to actually own them. In the case of the Bentley on Forza, you're not even allowed to drive it. Now, with the Moon Rover, we can drive this vehicle, and that's pretty cool, but you've only got 3 missions to work with. Now, as far as the overall experience, it's something that every Gran Turismo player should definitely try, because at the end of the day you're not paying out any cash for the car at all. Personally, I wish we could buy the car and have it in the garage. Even if we weren't allowed to drive it on any of the tracks, it would still just be cool to say you've got the Moon Rover in your garage. That would just be awesome. Personally, I would love to see it have that price of $38 million in the game. It would make it the most expensive car in the game. That would be totally appropriate to the vehicle, and it would give you something to work towards. Now this, in effect, represents on GT6 what, to some degree, the 1886 patent motor wagon and the Daimler motor carriage represented on Gran Turismo 4. They were super slow, had hardly any power, but they were on the game and ownable and drivable because of their historical significance. Other vehicles like the Ford Model T fall into that same category. This vehicle, on the other hand, has the disadvantage that you can't actually own it, and that's a real shame, I think. Maybe in the future that'll change, but I don't think this is the kind of thing that will return. I don't see moon missions being a part of Gran Turismo Sport anytime soon, but obviously I hope I'm wrong. As far as enjoying driving the car, that depends on each individual person. Some people will probably love driving this thing, other people probably wouldn't care less. Personally, I completed the missions primarily just out of curiosity and because it's part of the career mode. Is it the kind of thing that I would revisit? Well, I would have to say no. It was fun the first time around, but the car being as slow as it is, the kind of awkward physics of having very low gravity on the moon just make it an interesting experience, but not necessarily one that you need to do twice. Overall though, definitely check the car out on the game, and I can't recommend buying it because you can't buy it. But if you could buy it, I definitely would recommend it. And incidentally, this car has a whopping 5 horsepower per tonne. But that's it overall for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.